Hey, Mike. Hey, Dad. I'll call you Dad. Other people probably call you Mike.
You're one of the four people that call me dad.
Well,
But
that's
yeah, hey, son, Ethan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to be back with you on the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. I got a question for you. We both understand as managers, as people that have been in leadership positions, for much of our professional careers, that having to give hard feedback to employees or correcting employees' behaviors is not the fun part about the job. Um,
Mm-mm.
and it tends to be really difficult for us as managers to correct employees' behaviors. And I'm just curious of your thoughts on this. Like, why does correcting employees' behaviors tend to be difficult for us as managers, for you as a manager?
It's funny when you just asked me that. I just remembered a conversation in one of my workshops when I asked everybody, like, raise your hand if one of your favorite parts of your job is correcting employees' behavior. And nobody raised their hand, and I realized I should never ask that again, because if someone did raise their hand, I'd be like, I don't think you should be a manager.
Right.
there's something wrong with that, right?
A good
Because
weeding out process.
yeah,
No.
exactly. Because one of the reasons we don't like it is because, I mean, among many reasons, we don't like making people feel bad. I would hope that every manager we work with does not like making people feel bad. And so here you are in a situation where 99% sure that you are probably going to make this person feel bad, and nobody likes that. So there's one reason why we hate it. What else? Why else do we hate this
Because we
part of our
don't
job?
like making people feel bad. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, I think that's the big reason. Like, I think all the other reasons kind of branch off from that. I mean, I think
Right.
why it tends to be difficult for me as a manager. I mean, it's difficult because I often don't feel like I have the right words, know
Mm-hmm.
what to say. I'm probably thinking about not wanting to hurt their feelings. I'm also thinking about wanting to act, but I actually need this behavior to improve. And so I think there's
Mm-hmm.
just a bit of a paralysis by analysis of finding
Yes.
those right words, right?
Yep. Yep.
And
That's
and
really
saying
true.
it clearly and kindly at the same time.
Yep. No, that's
Yeah.
good. That's true. Another one is I have to work with this person after today, and I might be, like it or not, I might be doing some damage to
Yeah.
this relationship. Right. This might make it more difficult for you to trust me. Unfortunately, for you to feel safe with me. Now hopefully, if I do it really well, I, that will mitigate that. But yeah, there's another fear I have, another concern.
Yeah. Same. I also think as a human being, I kind of want to be liked. Like I want to be liked. And there's a possibility that after I have to have this hard conversation, this person's not going to think highly of me and is not going to like me. And I think for
Mm-hmm.
people that say, "Oh, I don't really care about that. I don't really care about being liked as a manager," I think probably for 99.9% of people, uh, that's BS. I think it's a deep human need to want to be cared about and liked, and that could potentially damage that.
Yeah, and I think that almost be a red flag for me if a manager say I don't really care about if my employees like me or not. I mean I've heard that, and it seems to come with the kind of manager who's not very good at showing caring and respect and building relationship. So
Yeah,
I'd be
yeah.
a little worried about that.
I also think it comes from people saying the words because that's what they might have learned in the past. Is like
Mm,
leadership is not about being liked; it's about being effective.
right.
And so they're saying, I don't care about being liked. And it's probably not the case deep
Not
down.
true. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But that's a real fear,
yeah,
not being liked.
yeah. Yeah, it's a tough. It is a really hard part of managing, and I think that another reason that it's really difficult is this part of me that just wants this to be resolved. I want this person to step up, or stop doing the thing, or start doing the other thing, whatever it is. I want that to happen, and I want to help you get there, but I'm probably frustrated. I
Hmm.
want it to happen tomorrow. I'm maybe worried it's not going to work, whatever I do here. So it's, yeah, it's fraught. It's
Yeah.
very fraught.
And not knowing, kind of the uncertainty, not knowing how they're going to respond, and what do I do next if I have
Right.
this conversations and then things don't change. I mean, a lot of fears come with having these hard conversations for sure.
Yeah, and with all that being said, it is, like it or not, right? It's part of our job as leaders to hold people accountable. We absolutely have to do that. And we don't like it, we don't love it, but we have to go into management with our eyes open that absolutely is part of our job, and it's a skill that we need to grow.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So, I mean, today we're gonna be talking more, obviously, about having some of these hard conversations, how to correct employees' behaviors and, how to have, what we might call kind of progressive conversations. So when things aren't improving or aren't changing, we're kind of moving along in the conversational process, if you will. Real briefly, I just want to conceptually put this concept on everybody's radar again. And this is the concept of both psychological safety and high performance standards. And in our workshop series for leaders, Managing with Mind and Heart, we talk about this on day one, that as a leader, as a manager, to create a high performing team, a team that feels connected, we have to work on building psychological safety, which is, generally, create a climate where people feel free to speak up, give me feedback as a manager openly, be able to disagree with me and disagree with other people, being willing to take, smart risks and it being okay to go through setbacks and failures. It's kind of a culture of candor, if you will. Um, that's obviously really important. With that, we also want to create a culture of still having high performance standards. And I think people get a little bit lost in psychological safety, thinking that, oh, to create psychological safety, we can't push people too hard in terms of our performance standards. But these two things are not mutually exclusive. Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the intersection
Mhm.
between psychological safety and having high performance standards?
Yeah, I'll kind of get there through the side door by saying I recently was in a situation with a client group where an employee had been given some feedback. From what I gathered, it was appropriate. It was well said. It was kind, but it was feedback about their certain behavior, and they pulled out the psychological safety card. You
Mm,
know, now I do not feel psychologically safe anymore because I got feedback. So it was this misunderstanding and kind of not the proper context, right, for what we're talking about here. And so I'm using that story to say that psychological safety and, as you said, accountability, high performance standards, they absolutely have to go together. And as you increase one in the organization, you kind of have to increase the other kind of incrementally, back and forth, back and forth. You can't just maximize one and not even focus on the other, because it becomes a mess. And so, for example, um, I need to hold high performance standards. And let's say you're not quite there yet. It's the how that matters. How
mm,
do I help you get to this high performance standard? Do I do that in a way that shows how much I care about you, that I respect you, that I'm willing to walk with you through this? I'm willing to coach you. I have your back. So I can build psychological safety at the exact same time that I'm holding up high performance standards. Does that make sense?
absolutely. Yeah,
You know?
I think that's really well said. I know when we talk about this term accountability, and the phrase accountability is obviously thrown around a lot, and I think much like psychological safety, it's a bit misunderstood perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
or we're only looking at one element of accountability and not looking at it more kind of holistically.
Yep.
Um, in your view, like what does it mean to have high performance standards and kind of hold a
Mm.
team or employees accountable? How do you think about that, generally
I,
speaking?
I I think about accountability as not just the reactive side of dealing with a bad behavior or a missed deadline. It's the whole show. I'm committed to walking with you as an employee toward your success. Like I'm committed to doing what I need to do to help you be successful. And that would include everything from really good uh, onboarding and clear expectations and coaching and advocating for you. And yes, praising when you do it well and correcting when you don't. It's the whole story, right? That's accountability, and you can do all that through a with a lens or a in the context of psychological safety. How I treat you, how I make you feel, how I listen, how I respond, how I take your feedback. All that can happen together. That's the hope, right? That's the goal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great, right? So, again, it's a accountability. It's a commitment to actively participating in your employee success, which has
Right.
many elements to it, as you mentioned, including holding yourself accountable to what you said. And it's kind of the mindset of we expect and strive for excellence here, right? We have high expectations. It's about having clear goals of
Mm-hmm.
what we're supposed to be getting done, what's expected. It's about providing smart autonomy to people so they can
Mm-hmm.
succeed. It's also
Mm-hmm.
about follow-up, following up on their commitments, which includes providing praise and recognition where it's due, providing learning opportunities in your follow-up, and correcting, you know, certain employee behaviors or when there is not the performance standards that we're aiming for here. And again, today we're going to be talking about just one element of accountability, which is kind of more on the correcting employee behavior side of things. But let's not lose sight of psychological safety is still operating in the background, or actually, rather, I'd say it's still operating front and center while you're
Mm-hmm.
having these corrective conversations with employees. So,
Yeah, I
the
like the way you
biggest,
said that. They're not only not mutually exclusive, you can't even separate the two. Like they have
right.
to be happening at the same time. I like that. Yeah.
I want to go here if you'll go here with me.
I'll go wherever you lead.
Okay. So I mean, we talked about why us as managers tend to not like having these corrective hard conversations. Um, but I want to know like what types of manager responses to unproductive behaviors tend to be ineffective. Like where do you sometimes see managers maybe misstep in terms of how they're responding to less than ideal behaviors or performance?
Oh, where do I begin? So many.
Hmm.
Let me mention a couple, and I'll throw it back to you. Uh, Not doing anything, not saying anything, hoping it gets better, hoping it gets better, hoping it gets better, and then getting frustrated, and then coming in with some sort of, this is the fifth time you've done this, and now I'm upset, and so it's like zero and then to 60, right? So it's ignoring and then overreacting is unfortunately one pattern I've seen, and I'll just mention one more. Bringing negative emotion into it. And what I mean by that is remembering, of course, that I have this power differential. And on top of that, I'm actually correcting your behavior. Both of those things can create a little bit of fear and anxiety for you. And if I add to those two things, you also can tell that I'm frustrated because I sound that way, right? In my voice, or I'm sounding angry, or I'm having the angry face, the angry eyes, all that together. Those three things: power differential, I'm correcting your behavior, and I sound mad. Game over for your amygdala. You absolutely are gonna have to shut down or get defensive or not respond very well.
Yeah, yeah. And when your amygdala is activating, it actually renders you unable to reflect, to learn,
Yep.
to
Yep.
listen, to show up with curiosity, which at the end of the day, when we're having to have a hard corrective conversation, we absolutely want to create the conditions where that person can listen, learn, and approach it with curiosity. So that's foundational. I mean, another thing, maybe this is maybe a little bit of a less common thing that happens, but kind of going straight to the nuclear option when there's an employee behavior. So somebody doesn't meet performance standards or behaves in a way that's not ideal, but it's like the first time type of things, and we go straight to this is a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
If this happens again, we're on a performance improvement plan and just kind of you've progressed it way too far right off the bat. And I mean, this is kind of what we're talking about today is having what we call progressive conversations, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. And here's the related one, which is the opposite, which is what we call camping, right? Which is
Hmm.
I'm going to talk to you about this problem, and then it happens again a few weeks later, and I'm going to talk to you about that problem again, pretty much the same way I did last time, and then it happens again a month later, and I'm going to have the exact same conversation with you again, and I do that, and I do that, and I do that, and that's called camping, and I think that's a huge problem because that weirdly actually reinforces the bad behavior.
How so?
Well, it's kind of a psychological thing. It's this homeostasis that I've created. It's this pattern. It's this dance. You do this thing, I do this. You do this, I do this. We do that over and over again. And it actually embeds this homeostasis into our behaviors. And that homeostasis becomes very hard to break, right? This dance that I've created, and really I've created it because I'm the one with the power differential. So I'm
Mm,
responding the same way every time, every time, every time. It becomes less likely that you're going to change that behavior because of that.
right. Okay. I, you know, I'm an employee. I kind of start talking poorly about another employee behind their back. As a manager, I say kind of don't do that. Let's not have those type of conversations. They say okay, they do it again. You come back, hey, let's not do that. They do it again. So basically, it's like we get the message that this is just what happens. Is I'll have this conversation, and it doesn't necessarily. It's not really that big of a deal type of thing to keep coming back to this conversation from the employee's perspective. So I keep kind of doing the thing.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that cost benefit analysis maybe unconsciously going on for the
Yeah.
employee. Like it doesn't cost me really anything. And and again, it's that repeated pattern, and all this is super subconscious, right? But over and over again, we just got into this. Basically, we're in this dance that just keeps happening over and over and over again. And the more often that continues, the more often that happens, the more likely I'm going to be doing my part of the dance, and you're going to be doing your part of the dance. And so it becomes harder and harder to break that pattern psychologically,
Hmm.
and that's on me as a manager, right? Because I'm the one that, again, with the power differential, that keeps coming back and doing the same thing over and over and over. We basically all acclimate to this is how it's going to be. This is our
Right.
dance.
Yeah. And then I get frustrated as a manager. It's not working. Nothing seems to change. I'm trying to hold this employee accountable. It's not working. So why don't we bring in this, like, let's maybe talk about this in a little bit more detail. So progressive conversations. Why don't you kind of further introduce progressive conversations and talk about some of the kind of key principles to keep in mind with this?
Yeah. So the alternative to ignoring the behavior and the alternative to camping, again, camping is just responding the same way over and over again, is what we call progressive conversations. I I don't love the word progressive only because it's I think a lot of our clients immediately think we're talking about progressive discipline because those words tend to go together. Progressive discipline. I just want to be really clear. We're not talking about progressive discipline. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that progressive discipline might not be the end part of this path,
Right.
but we're talking about conversations. We're talking about making sure that your conversations, they stay relational, right? They stay respectful. You still demonstrate that you have their best interest at heart. You're not getting mad, you're not getting mean, but they're progressively more impactful in the way they're delivered. And will talk about some examples of that. They capture attention because there's movement, right? You're doing something different each time. You're breaking homeostasis. You're not creating homeostasis. And so in a sense, it keeps the employee a little bit um, wondering what's next, right? And not necessarily wanting there to be a next thing. You don't even have to have an explicit or an implicit uh, threat around a consequence necessarily for the employee to experience that, oh, it was this conversation this last time, but this next time the conversation felt a little bit different, a little bit more intense, right? That's a directional thing that makes it more likely that I'm going to stop and say, well, I don't really want to continue on this path, right?
Mhm.
So those are progressive conversations. And should we talk a little bit about what those look like?
Yeah, let's talk about what that looks like. I mean, if I can just summarize it and
Yeah.
just maybe point out where I might be misunderstanding. But I mean, the big concept here is that when you need to keep coming back to correct the same behavior or performance, you take a slightly different angle or a slightly different step along kind of our path of progressive
Hmm.
conversations.
Hmm.
And this could range everywhere from the first time you're having that conversation, which you'll get into kind of more of a, hey, by the way, or just, the initial feedback to if you look all the way on the other side, if you have to progress that far, yes, you might be getting into more of what they would call progressive discipline, but there's possibly a lot of stages in between that initial feedback and progressive discipline. But the point being is don't camp. You
Hmm.
have to move it along to help
Hmm.
kind of improve this performance, so on and so
Right.
forth.
Right. That's exactly right. And I think it's worth maybe taking just a real brief side note and remembering there's um, the default mode is we in all these conversations we've learned how to give feedback well. I want to make sure that and maybe you can link to a podcast on this in the
Yep,
notes, but
we'll do that.
that'd be great because it's important that I don't want to skip over too much the fact that regardless of where we're at in these conversations, we have some basic tenets here, right? Like we're going to talk about behavior. We're not going to talk about character. We're not going to say things like unprofessional and disrespectful. We're going to talk about in meetings, I'm noticing that when people share their opinion, you roll your eyes and you make sighing noises. And the
Mhm.
impact of that is that people are going to feel uncomfortable sharing. They're going to feel insulted. And so we learn how to give feedback no matter where we are in these progressive conversations. We have that basic piece down. So I just wanted to throw that in there first before we get into the progressive conversation.
Good. Yeah, that's a extremely helpful note. And once again, yeah, we'll link to an episode in the show notes about having BIR conversations, behavior impact replacement behavior, foundational for all of this. So I encourage you to go back to listen to that if you haven't. But why don't you keep running with this? This is good. So maybe like talk about like what maybe what is kind of the menu of conversations that you would have progressively? Like what does that all what might that look like?
So Ethan, hey, by the way, I've sent you an email a couple times this last week looking for an answer to that one question, and you haven't got back to me yet. Just wondering what's going on there.
Mm. Oh yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. I've been super busy. I saw your emails. I just haven't been able to get to it yet.
Okay, yeah, thanks, man. If you get to that, it'd be great.
Great.
So that's I didn't even realize I used the words by the way. You don't have to use those words, but we actually call that conversation a by the way conversation, and it's in many situations it makes, especially when you catch something pretty early, it's really nice. And I mean, what's the vibe? When I say by the way conversation, what vibe do you pick up from that, Ethan?
Just kind of a reminder, a light touch. It doesn't really feel like corrective at its
Mm-hmm.
core. It's just like a checking in to see if I had, missed something or I didn't see something. I don't know. It feels light. It feels respectful.
Yeah, there's a casualness. It doesn't mean it doesn't matter because it might have been something a little bit bigger. It might have been a way you showed up in the meeting yesterday that might have been somewhat offensive, right? But I can still, a little bit of that benefit of the doubt kind of vibe. And hey, I'm just going to point this out. I noticed this. Um, that's a place to start when you can afford to start there, right? And you can't always afford to start there. You can't. Hey, by the way, Ethan, don't embezzle anymore. You
Right.
know,
Right.
you know,
Which leads to a key point that what we're talking about these progressive conversations is like it's good to be kind of viewed as a menu instead of like a recipe, like do this, do this, do this. You have to use your judgment as a manager to figure out like how big of an issue is this, and that's going to kind of indicate where I might start with the conversation.
Yeah, that's really true. I love that you use the word judgment. That's really probably one of the most important aspects of good management, which is really hard to teach, frankly, right? And we try to help people get there by giving them these concepts, but it's judgment. And so yeah, it doesn't mean the situation doesn't matter. If this was to continue the situation, it really does matter. but I'm respecting you enough and I'm actually trusting you enough actually to start pretty low on my menu and
Yeah.
give you a chance, right? Just mention it casually, trust that you're going to figure it out based on that. Now, I might know or I might suspect you're not going to get it. I mean, I might know you enough. I might have had experiences with you in the past where I don't think that this, by the way, is going to do the trick. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't start there anyways. The whole point is we want to have progressive conversations. We want you to be able to sense the momentum and the direction of these conversations. And
Mm.
so starting light, if I can afford that, is a great place to be.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you could take that example that you gave of like, I haven't responded to your email. I got you the thing you wanted. I mean, imagine if you started with a full-on Birch conversation, right? So here's your behavior. I've sent
Right.
you a couple emails. You haven't got back to me. Impact is it's not allowing me to get what I need to get done. I need you to get back to me within 24 hours with these type
Mm.
of things. And by the way, if you can't do that, I think the next step is I'm gonna have to like monitor your task a little bit better. I mean, that's like right off the bat to get
Ouch.
there. It's like talk about a morale killer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've just not only have you crushed me in a sense, I've lost trust in you. It's a bummer to go that far. And here's another example of that, which I've seen, and sadly. Hey, by the way, Ethan, I'm noticing, I need the email, real casual thing, and you're fine with it. You say no problem, I got it, and then you go back to your office, let's say 3 hours later, and you get the email from me.
Mhm.
So, Ethan, per our conversation, I'm now
Mm,
documenting, I'm sending you an email. I've taken the by the way conversation and I've added this follow up email that just completely changed the tone of the whole thing. The follow up email would be an example of a further along
mm,
progressive conversation. That's one example of how might want to make another conversation, maybe the third conversation,
yeah.
progressive.
Okay. So let's keep running with this. So maybe let's take the same example we're using, or feel free to go
Okay,
to a different example if it's
sure.
more instructive. But okay, so you said, you talk to me, hey, just can you kind of a reminder, by the way, get this
Mm-hmm.
stuff to me. It happens again. I'm not getting back to you when you want me to. What would
Mm-hmm.
be an example of kind of the next step to take? And then let's also say if it happens again, what would be the next step after that?
Yeah, that's great. There's I want to again say what you said. This really is menu, not recipe. I think that's really important that we keep saying that because there's lots of different choices. Um, Although there's a few that make sense kind of up front. So let's say it's now a couple weeks later, and I've had maybe one or two more situations where you're not getting back to me, and it's roadblocking me. I now realize, and I suspected this is a bit of a pattern, right? This is a thing that's frustrating. It's something that needs to be repaired or needs to be remedied. So I've already done the first, by the way. Now I'm going to come back, and you know what? I might just have to say, hey, Ethan, I want to chat with you about something. That alone, right? I want to talk to you about something that sets up the fact that there's something important coming. So
Right.
there's that feels progressive, and then I might refer back to the conversation we had. Hey, I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks ago there was that one thing, and I needed it. I
Yeah,
mentioned
I
it to you.
remember. I
You remember
remember.
that? Yeah, right. So that um, um, twice more since then, I've had similar experiences now where there was this one thing last Tuesday. There's this thing that happened yesterday. I'm kind of starting to see a pattern here, and I just want to figure out a way to maybe help you get past that. I want to be able to find a way for us to have a more kind of a fluid, effective email communication thing going on between us. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that would just be helpful to kind of get on the same page here. And yeah, in fact, I could probably use some help figuring out how to prioritize things like that.
Yeah, good. Well, let's talk about that. And so then at that point we might go into a little bit of coaching or supportive and I might ask you, hey, what can I do? Is there something I can do to make it easier for you? What maybe there's something I'm doing that's actually contributing to this. So
Yeah.
So what we've done there in that conversation, we've actually combined, and that's one of the points, by the way, of progressive conversations, is you can kind of mix and match. So I've combined a couple elements there. I combined the, hey, I want to talk to you about something. I've combined the let's refer back. I'm reminding you about a previous conversation. And by the way, the power of referring back, this is something we say in the workshops quite often, is that there's 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 two things I've just communicated to you when I refer back to a previous conversation, and two things that you might not have known.
Mm.
Right. Number one, I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
Right. I'm seeing a pattern now. I haven't let go of that first experience. Right. I'm seeing it. I'm paying attention. Number two, it matters. Right. The fact that I'm coming back again means that this is a thing that matters. And those two things, and it's not bad on your part that you didn't know those two things, but now you do. Right. And that
Mm.
often is enough for
Yeah.
employees to go, oh, okay, got it. Right. This
Yeah.
matters.
And one thing I've noticed about kind of where we're at so far in this progressive conversation is you haven't brought in any necessarily like true next steps or consequences. Okay.
Right.
Now, okay, we've had this conversation several weeks later. I'm still not getting you the stuff in time that you need to. What would that next conversation look like? Or what would be one of the options as far as that next conversation?
Yeah, let's break that down. And first of all, I'm assessing this situation. Let's say we're in the context of a situation where in most other parts of your work and our working relationship, things are going fine. Okay,
Hmm.
let's assume that you're doing a great job with customers and with whatever else you do, and we're doing well together. But there's this thing, and it's not the end of the world, but it matters.
Yeah.
So I'm going to probably choose to I even though it's the third conversation, I'm not going to be going in a direction that sounds like we're doing discipline at this point. I'm going to be going into a more what I would consider sort of intense, but it's about coaching. It's about I want to come alongside you now. I want you to definitely see that this is a big deal. It matters, right? Or a big enough deal that we're going to have another conversation. But I'm also going to lean into the direction of equipping and supporting and training and whatever it is you need. Um, so, ingredients for that conversation, I would say, for example, have I been clear about B, I, and R? I'd ask myself that. What's the behavior? That's probably relatively clear. Have we got an impact? Maybe I haven't had enough of a conversation where you're
Mm.
understanding the
Yeah.
impact on me, the impact on us. So that might be conversation. I might need to be more explicit about the replacement behavior. It might be time to say, look, can we create a common commitment here between us? I want to support you in this. We'll talk about ways to kind of help you get there. But can we create a situation where I can expect a response within 48 hours, right? Whatever it is that I need, right? And maybe there's some education in there as well. Do you understand, Ethan, that I don't need you to respond with the full meal deal research or answer in some cases. Sometimes I just need you to respond, right? Maybe you need to be more clear about expectations. Um, I'll add a couple other things. I
Yeah.
might have this conversation with you at a coffee shop, and I know that sounds kind of frivolous, but I might get together with you and say, hey, let's go out and talk about this thing. This is this. You're doing great. I might give you a bunch of compliments, but I might in the coffee shop say, let's talk through this. Let's create some action plans on how we can make this happen. So I've
Okay.
put a bunch of elements in there, right? A coffee shop, action plan, BIR, coaching. I've done a bunch of stuff there to say to you, this is a thing. I'm going to stay on it. I'm going to support you. I would think that would be enough for you to understand that. In fact, I would say if you can't do it at this point after that, I would wonder if we're talking about capacity and skill. Like there might be something that is actually keeping you from that.
Mm.
Or I might have to say, no, he's just not getting it. And I need to up the ante a little bit more and maybe suggest that discipline might come next. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, the general concept here makes a lot of sense, right? Again, you're continuing to progress it, And the scenario that we're using as the case study, that progression makes sense. And then I'm thinking, okay, so you have that meeting where you change locations, you go to the coffee shop, you build some common commitments, you help the person understand kind of the impact on this. And this isn't just like because I want you to do it, it actually
Hmm.
affects our work as a team. And then, you're assessing if there's what might be getting in their way, right? You're offering help. Things are still not improving, and we don't
Hmm.
need to necessarily like get into all the steps here, but at some point we're eventually talking about there is probably some disciplinary action, and I'm still kind of using disciplinary action loosely here, or there's at least some sort of like here is going to be the next step if we can't get this figured out. And this is assuming that you've maybe, I mean, let's take for example, you've identified that there is just a workload issue, and you're maybe working to remove that. So I'm looking at what might be going on in the system as well that could be causing this.
Right.
Um, but yeah, like help us continue to kind of understand
Hmm.
how progressive conversations would look, and then we'll maybe take one other just quick, more extreme case study and figure out
Okay.
where we're going to land with that.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll do a different study, but case study. But I would say I've got three. I'm going to assess for three possible things going on here at this point. Like so we've done that coffee shop conversation. And I'm still not getting what I need. I'm going to ask myself. I'm going to look in three directions. Number one, you just mentioned. I'm really glad you said this. Is there something systemic that's roadblocking you? Which means I need to get involved in a different way. Is
Hmm.
if I've given you too much to do, whatever it is, workload, etc. So there's a systemic option I'm going to consider. Another option I'm going to consider is you just can't. I mean, it's meaning the system isn't the problem. You're not going to be able to do this, even if I was to quote move us into discipline. It's an actual ability. It's something that's going on for you that is just making it. So now I'm going to have to go in the direction of either training, um, equipping you in some ways to help you grow that skill, or, and this isn't discipline, but it's a consequence, I might have to do some adjusting. I might have to do something different in your job. I might have to do something to make it so that you can thrive and not have you doing something that you're just not very good at. I might have to do something to mitigate, right? And in my third direction, if I'm assessing that you're, and I've been here before, where you're just not seeing it as a priority, even though we've had these conversations, you're just not prioritizing this, and I actually do have to up the ante now. I
Hmm.
might have to go with some kind of consequence disciplinary thing, keeping in mind that discipline could be classic performance improvement plan sort of thing, or it could be, this isn't necessarily discipline, but it's a consequence. Um, I might actually have to do something a little bit more drastic around, is this really the fit, right? Is this the right place, right?
Yeah.
Is this the right job, right? So
Yeah.
you can see, of course, that this is all, super based on judgment and knowing the employee, asking the right questions, being curious. But the bottom line is, at least for our sake of this conversation, we're approaching this in progressive ways. The
Mhm.
chances are, and I really believe this,
Yeah.
that as employees experience those progressive conversations, they are way more likely to figure it out and get
Totally.
back on track.
Totally. I would agree with that. Just on my observations is that the vast majority of people will start to figure it out as you have these progressive conversations, and you figure out as a manager what you might need to adjust, whether clarity
Right.
around expectations. And yeah, there are the outliers where something is still not clicking. And like you mentioned earlier, right, we're assessing, is this a skill issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? A capacity issue?
Mm-hmm.
Is it more of a willingness issue? But like, let's assume it's a skill or capacity issue. Yeah, you're talking about, can I rearrange the job? Can I put them in a different position? And of course, as each organization is going to be unique, and we have to grapple, if you're a smaller organization, like, is there even another role? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're a
Mm-hmm.
company of 12 people or something like that. It's like there may be another position for you, but we have to grapple with there might not be, and then the progressive conversation might continue into something like, let me provide you maybe coaching to see if I can't up your skill or capacity. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
just kind of thinking through this that it's not, this is one of the things that managers struggle with, I think, is just their organization structure is not necessarily set up to just find a way to make this work for this employee.
yeah, and I'm glad you said that because it just prompted me to remember there's this other option, which is this accommodation option that might mean we both adjust. And so, for example, in that particular situation, I might suggest, especially after this third conversation, and you're still not responding to my emails, I might say, look, let's have another progressive conversation, and I'm going to say, look, we're going to have to do something different, right?
Yeah.
I really need this. It's not working. We've talked about roadblocks. I've tried to help. I'm going to, for the next 3 months, I want to set up standing meeting on our calendars. We're going to get together, or we're going to use Zoom or Teams, and we're going to get together every Thursday morning. We're going to take half an hour. We're going to look at your task list. We're going to look at the things I've been asking for that week or last week and see where you're
Mhm.
at. I'm going to basically, in a sense, do some hand holding and make this thing happen. I'm just going to make it happen. And hopefully, not only will I get what I need, I think there's some training and some, some neuroplasticity and some muscle memory and some other stuff maybe happening for you as we have those weekly meetings over time. And maybe we can wean off of those, maybe we can go to every other week, maybe,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. So there's a really intense coaching kind of a spirit there.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you wouldn't frame it this way, but one way to kind of look at that is one of the progressive conversations or progressive actions that you might take is peeling back a little bit of autonomy. And
Yes.
that hopefully is temporary. But I mean, we talk about providing autonomy, providing smart autonomy, and part of pulling that back in this case is, yeah, we're going to meet weekly. We're going to look at your priorities. We're going to shift things
Mm-hmm.
around. We're going to figure out when you're going to get in these tasks. And after a while, we'll start adding, we won't need to do this forever. And so, um, I think that, I don't know. I've struggled with that in the past of just like once I start having to think about, oh, maybe the only way to approach this is to give less autonomy. I'm a little bit scared of that because I know how powerful autonomy is for motivation and stuff. But let's remember, we've progressed to this point, and eventually you have to maybe go there. I don't know.
No, you're right. And when you do go there, two things: it's temporary, and you say that. You make sure you both know this is a temporary measure that's going to help us get to where we need to be, so it's not permanent. And you say, and hopefully, in a perfect world, they actually literally help you get to that solution. Like this is
Yeah.
maybe less of a here's what we're going to do, mandate, blah blah blah, and maybe a little bit more of a let's figure this out together. What can we put into place, even temporarily, and hopefully you can get to that together.
Yeah. Actually, that totally resonates with me. I've been in that situation before. It actually was around kind of prioritization and through conversations. It was basically the employee saying, "Can we just sit down together at our, every other week meeting and look at everything that's on my plate and you help me figure out what's important?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that makes sense, right? You
Cool.
have a lot on your plate." So that makes sense to me. Can I ask, just as we're kind of winding down here, I do want to maybe take as a case study a bit more of an extreme behavioral problem, if you will. So okay, it's not about just someone not getting work in on time, but say somebody the behavior was you blew up during the meeting and you shouted
Hmm.
at your colleague. Like you raised your voice and shouted at your colleague. I would imagine, and just let me know how you think about this. You're starting at a different stage in the progressive conversations. You're not starting at, hey, by the way, don't yell at your colleagues, maybe, but
Hmm.
you might be starting at a full BIR conversation, behavior impact replacement behavior, and perhaps even a behavior impact replacement behavior, and talk about some of like consequence with that because it is a big deal. Um, I don't know. I'm rambling on here, but
No,
help me and
no,
us
you're.
think through that.
I'm 100% with you. Yeah, by the way is way too low to start with that. They have to understand that this is a big deal. This is actually a really good example of where you can still maintain respect and care about that person and also be really firm. In fact, I think your psychological safety and your high performance standards, combination is relevant right here. So because my temptation might be to go toward the, what the heck were you thinking, and kind of just really come down on them. And I obviously don't want to go the other way, which is, oh, no big deal, I hope you're okay. I want to combine together. And so my ingredients would be, let's get together ASAP, real soon. Let's get together as soon as possible, and let's get
Hmm.
together. So let's have a conversation so that they know this is a big deal. I would maybe start with some caring and respect and saying, hey, what's happening for you? This is what I saw. Are
Yeah.
you okay? Can you tell me what happened? Were you feeling something? So I might start with that, so that, I'm leading with empathy. I'm leading with understanding that they probably didn't wake up that morning and think, how can I, be an absolute jerk today? So, but in that conversation, exactly right. I'm going to talk about, make sure we understand the behavior, that we both see it the same way.
Hmm.
Talk about impact. Maybe let that person help me explore the impact.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes to consequence, it might be enough to say, can we agree this can never happen again?
Mm.
Can we agree that that cannot happen again? I think that tone, that end result, that we both agree, and I might even add in, is there something I can do to help support you if you end up having another bad day like that before you get to a meeting? But if I'm sufficiently serious and I have a tone of voice that even says I'm serious, that this matters, the potential consequence might not have to be spelled out.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe as another example, okay, so someone is late and say this is in a hospital environment. It's a nurse that's late, and it's kind of hard for the rest of the team to do their thing if there's a nurse that's late,
Right.
right? People are covering for each other, there's patients. And so I'd imagine like, hey, we're all going to accidentally be late at times, right? Maybe the first conversation is just a checking in. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
what happened? And there's a reasonable explanation, and they're already owning that they knew they
Yes.
were late and they apologize, but they're late again, and it might be more of you know, a different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you can imagine in certain professions and jobs and environment, being late is a big deal and it has a huge
Mm-hmm.
impact on the whole team. And you might
Mm-hmm.
progress that a little bit quicker than I'm not getting work in on time.
Yeah, and you're getting to the judgment, which is always the key point here. You said something about owning, and I want to make a point about that. The nurse owned it, and let's
Hmm.
go back to the person who blew up in the meeting. They owned it. That allows me to have the conversations that we just described. Now, let's say the person who blew up in the meeting gets defensive when I bring up what happened, and doesn't own the problem, and makes excuses, right? I'm going to probably be more likely to say, look, we need to have a commitment here. And you need to understand, if this kind of thing happens again, we're most likely going to have to move into a performance improvement plan. So,
Right.
so see, my approach is going to be different based on the employee's ability to kind of join with me and
Yeah.
cooperate and own the problem.
Yeah. And again, it's judgment is key here, because
Yes.
imagine that situation where somebody yells at somebody in a meeting, but they didn't just yell at that somebody in a meeting. They slap books out of their hand,
Oh my
and
gosh.
you have a
Yeah.
conversation with them, and they're like, "I really own that. I shouldn't have done that." Okay, you own that, but that is, we are very far along in the progressive conversations just based on that behavior right there. I mean, we're looking at workplace violence at that point, right? And so we're probably all the way to a disciplinary stance based on that, you know.
At the very least, HR is
Right.
part of this, right? Yeah, yeah. So you're right. Yeah, I mean, where you start on the progressive conversations is based on the behavior, based on your judgment of the situation.
Yep.
In most cases, we are starting. And think of it this way, right? Start as low on the scale as is safe, as is appropriate, right? Start at
Hmm.
the lowest place that actually makes sense, right?
Hmm.
So that you have some room to move if you have to have more than one conversation.
Maybe what? maybe one final question for you here. What if I'm a manager and I'm listening to this episode for the first time and I'm understanding progressive conversations and I'm kind of looking back at an employee I have that has been behaving in ways that are really not good, but I have just kind of been camping.
Mm,
How should I maybe think about approaching it from there? Because I can't just maybe say, well, I've just had the by the way conversation for the last 5 times, but now that I understand this, I probably should just skip like to the very end and go discipline.
right.
I'm just saying, I'm guessing some of our listeners might have that question. Like, how do I might
Yes.
recover from camping in the past?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I've heard that question before. This is a good example of a place to be humble, right? A place
Mhm.
to own it as a manager and say, "Hey, my bad." You know, to basically sit down. This might be a let's go out somewhere. Let's talk this over. You're going to refer back to all the other conversations, and you're going to own the fact that you're having to refer back to 15 conversations or 6 conversations, and you're going to say, "Look,
Yeah.
that's my bad. It hasn't been fair to you. I've by the way I've addressed this with you, I most likely implied that it's maybe not that big of a deal. I that's on me. And so let's start over, right? Let's start over in the sense of, this thing, whatever we're talking about, has happened a bunch of times, but we need to make sure it doesn't keep happening. So at that point, you're now moving into the next stage. You're not going from 0 to 60. It's because it was on you, you're going to just go to the next step. Let's
Yeah.
talk about this. Let's create an action plan. Let's talk about what might happen if this doesn't get better. So just own it and keep going.
That's good. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Thank you for that. All right. Well, maybe to close out the episode here, would you mind sharing some of, maybe the mindsets that you like to keep front and center whenever you're engaging in kind of corrective feedback, engaging in these progressive conversations? Like, what's the heart part of this that we need to keep in mind?
That's a great question. You know what? I want to let our listeners know that we have a 6-day managing with mind and heart course, and this piece we're talking about here is all the way at day 4, which means we do not just start with this. Like, there's
Mm.
so many concepts that we want managers to have, and many of those concepts are about the mindset and the heart part of mind and heart. And so it's like, don't try this at home. Make sure you get this other stuff first, right? And so I would include things like, um, oh, it's so important that that employee knows that I have their best interests at heart already. Like, that's already been part of our relationship, right? They know that I care about them. That context makes these conversations so much more effective. So I'd start with that. I'd add the belief that the fact that I've created a relational bank account that they feel psychologically safe, that I can actually have coaching conversations with them, and they know that I'm being sincere, etc. So,
Yeah.
and many more, right? How about you? What would you add to that?
Well, I mean, I just build off it with coming back to a mindset I've talked about many times in this podcast that I try to reflect on each and every day, which is, again, coming back to curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think you absolutely, no matter where you're at in these progressive conversations, you can come in with a mindset of curiosity, um, kind of a mindset of, I am both here to have the conversation I need to have and stay open to what I might be able to learn, from this person I'm having a
Mm-hmm.
conversation with, how they think about things, how they think about the world, their perspective on things, what might be getting in their way. I think if we can come in with that attitude, that mindset, all right, not with the mindset of I am here to be right, but I'm here to learn as well. I think that can be a powerful framing to make those conversations go well, and that you're probably more naturally going to be able to show up with care and respect, even when you're having some of the most difficult conversations.
That's really good. That's really good. I'm going to add uh, empathy, in the sense that I know this person wants what I want in life. They want to be successful.
Mhm.
They don't want to be in trouble. So empathy as opposed to judgment. And then also just remember my power differential, in the sense that this is my job.
Mhm.
It is my job to ensure a healthy, effective workplace, I have every right and actually responsibility to have these conversations. And so I'm not going to shy away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for this. This is actually, I mean, this has been really helpful for me just to talk to you about this as I'm thinking about some of my own management practices. And I'm sure hopefully our listeners got a lot out of this as well. So um, I would just say, for our listeners out there, if this was a helpful episode, if you enjoyed this episode, maybe consider just doing us a favor and leaving us a review on our podcast. You can do so on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That just helps us kind of grow the show, help other people find the show that might benefit from this stuff. But besides that, yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and tune in next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, folks, wait. Don't go yet. Please, stay with me for 1 second here. I want to let you know about a couple cool little goodies that we have available for you. If you dig this podcast, you will probably also dig our Managing with Mind and Heart newsletter. This is a monthly newsletter where we share articles that we write about, hey, how to thrive as a manager, how to lead teams that are characterized by high morale, engagement, psychological safety, care and respect, collaboration, and high performance. You can sign up for this newsletter by texting the word leading to the number 66866. Additionally, you can go to our website and sign up for the newsletter there. Our website is www.nashconsulting.com. And of course, if you're not already aware, we have our cornerstone program for leaders and managers, and it is called Managing with Mind and Heart. Go figure. This program is something that we often bring into organizations to work with all their leaders on helping them get aligned and singing off the same sheet of music with best practice management skills and behaviors. We've brought this to hundreds of organizations at this point with really good results. And if you are not able or inclined to bring our program in-house, twice a year, in the spring and in the fall, we offer this 6-day Managing with Mind and Heart leadership development program online for anybody that would like to sign up and join us. To learn more about this online course and to register, you can go to our website. Once again, that's nashconsulting.com. Or send us an email at contact@nashconsulting.com. All right, that's all. That's it. See you later. Bye.